Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat with Relieve Syria. Relieve Syria is a grassroots initiative created to share information and spread awareness about the ongoing effects of the sanctions enacted on Syria and its people and the consequences that have developed as a result of the decade of conflict and economic downturn. Relieve Syria aims to advocate for Syrians' inalienable right to live fulfilled and dignified lives in their homeland, specifically as it relates to economic opportunity. Today, I have the pleasure to speak with Roy Moussalli and Kurt Rhodes. A little bit about Roy. He is the founder and executive director of the Syrian Society for Social Development, Syrian-based nonprofit, non-governmental organization established in 2009, focusing on disadvantaged youth and communities displaced by conflict. Roy is also a key figure of Questscope, the organization Kurt Rhodes heads. Questscope is an international NGO where he provides leadership for the development of Questscope's programs in Syria and the greater Middle East, North Africa region with various governmental and non-governmental agencies, and he's been doing this for the past 15 years. Roy is a member of the Damascus Chamber of Commerce and is a graduate of the American University of Beirut, where he received his BS in mechanical engineering. Roy, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Kurt, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So, giving that background on you, Roy, I wanted to start off just with you telling us about yourself and really how you ended up doing what you do.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Just to say that I was born in Damascus with all my brother and sisters, and then eventually the whole family moved to Lebanon when there was the nationalization of schools and businesses. My father had a business also in Lebanon, so we moved there to Lebanon, and then we continued our studies. And I finished at the American University of Beirut, did 2 years of work, but eventually I had to either choose to emigrate or to come back to Syria and do my military service. After some discernments, I came back and chose to do my military service and finish with it. So once I came back, I worked, I did my military service. It was a long time, 3 years and a half, but I started working at the same time as an engineer and continued working in Syria as an engineer. Eventually, I got involved with people with mental disability who taught me a lot on the human relationship and who I was called to be in terms of relationship and the meaning of vulnerability and the richness that they can give to my life and to my relationships. I continued working with light diesel, working on Detroit diesel engines and Renault trucks. And eventually, with Kurt, who had founded Questscope in Jordan, I started supporting in some program development and consultations, and eventually moved a little bit to a full-time work. At that time, I was thinking that I'm doing a lot of work over the Middle East and worldwide, but I'm not able to support anything that is going on in Syria. And we tried to register an NGO since 2000. It didn't work out. We got the registration in 2009. This is when we founded the Syrian Society for Social Development, that we call SSD, working with marginalized youth, which is a little bit the same approach and the same priorities as Questscope was doing in Jordan and the Middle East, but also working with other categories of marginalized people, like people with disabilities with whom I have been working for the last 20 years almost. So that was the start of SSD, and the reason for why Questscope was founded and then SSD was founded is that the need to work with youth was a big priority. As Kurt always says, and he reminds us that we have in the Middle East the highest percentage of youth. We have the youngest population worldwide. And among the youth, we have the highest unemployment rates also worldwide, worse than sub-Saharan Africa, and imagine also worse than Europe, who is coming in the second position in terms of youth unemployment. So this combination of two factors we knew would lead to social destabilization. And I think with the Arab Spring, we saw how it was being handled and how it was being used. So we couldn't get the registration because youth was such a sensitive issue. Eventually, we got it in 2009. As you can see, I have moved out of my business in the Damascus Chamber of Commerce. I'm more in humanitarian, and now I'm the chair of the Global Child Protection Strategic Advisory Group. So we are taking some roles in Syria, but also some roles worldwide.
We wanted to learn a little bit about SSSD's mission, your goals, and some of the programs that you guys do in Syria, across Syria.
So, I mean, our logo is على الهامش وفي الصميم, from margin to center, and it's more about marginalized people, how to be at the center of our attention, but mostly how to make them at the center of participation, where we believe that the least have a role to play in the development of our society and community. We are, I mean, since our beginning, we have developed into the 14 governorates of Syria, and what you see in terms of the patches are the areas that we are covering in the various governorates. We are working through 54 centers that SSSD runs. They could be safe spaces for women, child-friendly spaces, community centers, or juvenile centers for girls and for boys. We are we have expanded to have a team of 1,500 staff and almost 2,500 volunteers, in addition to local committees, because we believe that we are not only called to provide services to the communities, but also to enable the communities to develop their capabilities. So this is happening through local committees that take care of their community members, and we support those local committees in coaching, training, and then even in funding. Last year we have about 2 million, above 2 million beneficiaries. The year before it was a little bit more or much more because of the COVID interventions. So we covered much more in terms of disinfection. The people that we are covering are the most vulnerable. So they can be children, dropouts, working children, unaccompanied and separated children, juveniles that are juveniles and at-risk children who are in need of psychosocial support.
Excuse me, when you say juveniles, do you mean children that might have committed a crime? Okay.
Children who are in conflict with the law, they could be, serving a sentence or waiting to serve a sentence. Women, mostly, we are talking about abuse or being at risk of being abused, and mostly women that are heading their households, so they have lost their husband or their husband is not around. The elderly, more and more, we are having a group of elderly people who have nobody around them. The younger generation is leaving and the elderly are left behind, the same with people with special needs. We are supporting families and communities. Our groups of concerns are those who have been internally displaced and those who have been affected, even though they have not left their houses, but they have been affected by the bombing, the economic situation, and other events. Now, more and more, we are addressing the needs of the returnees, those who have been internally displaced within Syria and coming back to their homes, or even some who have taken refuge in the neighboring countries and are gradually coming back to their homes instead of being outside. This is an example of the work that is being done in the juvenile center around Damascus where we have been working for the last 11 years. Our sectors of intervention would be child protection, everything that relates to children, gender-based violence, mine action. We have a lot of events where people are being hurt by mines. So we are making a lot of awareness on the remnants of war, and supporting those who have lost limbs with items, and also work. A lot of work in health, primary health care mostly, house rehabilitation, non-food items, basic stuff, water sanitation, hygiene promotion, but also a cross-sectoral approach for mental health and psychosocial support. This comes with all those interventions that we do. Education, an array of interventions on education, but an example, we had also people prepared for official exams, even those who are in non-government areas. So those would come for the baccalaureate or 9th grade exam. And we had 2 cases of kids who crossed the line to come for their exams, and on their way back, they were shot because they were punished for going and taking exams on the other side. So those are the kinds of hazards that the kids have to go through, but we support them as much as possible in their studies, but also in hosting them. Those are some examples of our program Fursa, where we target dropouts who are still working. Those kids are working in agriculture, in greenhouses. Outside of their working hours, we support them in education so that they can be mainstreamed eventually when they can into the formal education. A lot of support is being done to the communities, as I was saying earlier, supporting the communities to see what are the gaps, the needs in their communities, and responding with some initiatives. We do coaching, training, and then we support them in the funding, so they come up with their own problems, identifying what the problems are, and then see what the solutions could be, and they can work as a community on addressing those problems with the solutions they come up with. Mm-hmm. A very important sector of intervention is livelihoods. So we are talking of food security and agriculture. So instead of giving food baskets all the time, SSZ is not doing this, except for the juveniles who don't have enough food rations to cover their daily life. We don't do food baskets, but we do food security and agriculture support. Those could be supporting vulnerable groups of people, whether they are young people in working age, or women, or even some males, in having some work, giving them beehives, sheep, getting food baskets. They can support themselves with their own food. Other activities would be in terms of the agricultural support, providing them with fertilizers, seeds, seedlings, and animal feed. In terms of the small grants to help them bring up their resilience capabilities, we have between livelihood and agricultural and agro-pastoral support, we have supported around 4,000 grants for 4,000 families in the various aspects that you can see, whether they are commercial activities or production activities or service activities, each one depending on their skills, the experience they have, the capability, and the market needs that they see, that we see around them. We are doing this always in trying to see what are the vulnerabilities that we are seeing around us. So we register, when we go into the community, we registered the people who are vulnerable and who have specific needs, and we register what the needs are. We provide for those needs, but also we register what are the service gaps that exist. So, for example, we have 1,000 people that have chronic diseases, we are only able to support 300. So those are the service gaps that we registered, whether they are in general assistance, non-food items, or education or livelihoods, like I was mentioning, small business grants and vocational training. How do we get those registered? We have our own database system. So we have the data hub where we registered for each community, for each satellite center, for each community center, what vulnerability are, and then we see where the gaps are. So this system is a web-based system that we have developed that covers the 14 governorates where we are present. And this is really our tool for registering what we are doing, the needs, and analyzing the situation. I won't talk much about the systems that make this possible and the policies and the procedures that we follow to make us compliant with all the requirements of the donors. This will be another presentation, but just to tell you that it is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we are like sister organization, the SSD, the Syrian Society for Social Development, and QuestCo are really sister organizations working together on the ground and elsewhere. But we'll come back to that later if you want.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like you guys kind of have your hands full in terms of the variety of projects that you're doing across the board. You're not really focusing on one area or one specific program. You're really trying to spread it out across different demographics, different regions. And you know, that kind of begs the question of, you know, I'm sure that while your reach is great, that probably makes your challenges even greater. And I was wondering, what are some of the greatest of those challenges that you face?
I mean, it would be very logical to say that the lack of funding is our biggest challenge. As I was saying, analyzing where there are vulnerabilities, needs, and the gaps that we are filling, just at the SSD level, we can say that we are filling around 1/3 of the needs that we are seeing. So there's still a big gap between what is needed and what is provided. I would say on average, in the various sectors and region, it would be not more than 1/3. The second challenge that we are seeing is the erosion of cadre, of leaders and of trained people. Many are leaving. Some are leaving because they are finding better jobs with international organizations in Syria, but most of them are leaving the country. I mean, for various socioeconomic reasons, or they don't want to go into conscription, so they leave the country. So we have to constantly to replace them, train them, coach them. So that's another challenge. And one big challenge that we have to face all the time is the keeping the morale of our team that is down because of the economic situation, because we are not always able to provide them with a decent salary that can cover their, their needs in with dignity. So keeping that morale, we need a lot of accompaniment, about a lot of coaching, a lot of support, moral and also financial. So those I think would be our main challenges. Those are mostly internal challenges. Security-wise, things have stabilized in terms of security. So we don't feel that there is much concern at that level, although there are always eruptions here and there that you can never foresee. But mostly funding the erosion of leadership and keeping the morale of our team high would be our main challenges.
So are those internal, so when you are performing advocacy to donors, are those the challenges that you're articulating to them, or are you are you advocating other priorities?
Usually we share with the donors those. The biggest concern of the donor is, we need to do assessments so that we can show the donor that those are the needs that we are finding on the ground. So that kind of proving to the donor what are the needs, and then following sometimes the agenda of the donors and his priorities is something that we have to monitor constantly. This is, there are some things that we have to do internally, but with the donors, it's a different game. We have to know their priorities, and we have to develop the tools to show them that really what we want to provide is what is needed, and it conforms to their criteria, let's say, and priorities.
Understood. So my next question is, I think there are two sides of it, and I previously discussed this with Kurt, and so maybe he'd like to chime in a little bit. The first side of it is really how the Caesar Act and sanctions in general have impacted SSSD, and possibly also how the Caesar Act and sanctions have also impacted funding from donors outside of Syria to SSSD.
I can say a couple of words, Roy, about the mechanisms so that you can talk about the impact on the ground. Quescope has always intended to be an organization to enable others to do things. And part of that enablement was to envision what kinds of legal structures and what kinds of governmental agreements had to be in place, particularly with the United States government. So we, maybe almost 20 years ago, we established one of the first OFAC agreements for organizations working in Syria. That was quite a unique one. You would not get our OFAC agreement today. The agreement is for the organization, not for a project of the organization. So we've maintained the OFAC registration for almost 20 years without a hitch. So when the Caesar Act came in, the Caesar Act does not undo the OFAC regulations. So I don't think we've experienced anything. Donors are maybe afraid to give money because of the situation, but they're not afraid to give money because of our having OFAC. So to my knowledge, Roy, we've not had any donors who were unwilling to give because of regulations. They're more concerned about what's happening on the ground. And I'm sure that that's trimmed down the amount of money that's been available. And it's had an impact. It's multi-sectoral. When you stop food, when you stop medicines, when you stop all of the trade, that has serious implications on the ground.
And what does that mean in terms of just transferring money? Because from what I understand, that has been one of the most difficult and pronounced issues. Is that just transfer of just like cash?
Well, it's a banking problem, not an OFAC problem. So things have changed so rapidly that if you can't use a bank, then you use something else. If you can't use something else, you use something else than that. So constant creativity, but we always inform we have about 5 auditors, okay? So we always inform everybody and create the paper trail that proves that we have stayed within the guidelines. It slows down things, but we actually can move money.
Okay. Yeah, and Roy, if you want to expand on maybe how the sanctions and Caesar Act has impacted SSD and some of their works.
Yes, so besides what you have mentioned, with the problem of the over-compliance of the banks, they are so much afraid that they prefer to lose their fees for a transaction rather than go through a transaction. So we always have to find for new routings and for new intermediate banks. So it's always a job that you have to do. One of the main problems that we have to address is because of the problem of transferring money, when we have to do procurement to help the beneficiaries with non-food items or shelter rehabilitation or water sanitation stuff, you have to buy the material on the market. And that material is no more at the market cost. Because of the problems for import, then the price of the material doubles because the businessman has to pay so much to be able to import that this reflects on the material. Because of the sanctions, and we can talk about this a little bit more later, I mean, there are sanctions on the ship that are transporting fuel. So less fuel, black market fuel, no electricity, you have to resort to generators. And then not all the time you have fuel for generators. This drives the cost of fuel, of transport, of electricity, I mean, up the sky. So our running costs and the cost of material is galloping. It's skyrocketing. And the salaries are kept at the minimum level. So it makes a lot of tension within our operations, how to perform in the best way and how to retain our team. Those are really big challenges, and it is not something that is stable. You have to look at it almost on a daily basis. It consumes a lot of energy from all of us.
Yeah. And I know that what has been touted a lot from the US government regarding the Caesar Act has been its humanitarian exemptions. And I was interested to see, if those exemptions are effective or are there still hurdles, with, medications and other type of aid products. Do you still experience difficulties in those exemptions? Like, are they effective is what I'm trying to ask.
Effective depending on what we mean by effective. If they are effective in impoverishing the country, yes, they are effective. Are they effective in addressing the stated goal of the sanctions? No, because we can see things are not changing. But what is happening on the ground is that whether it is for me, for my family, or for the everyday Syrian, as I was mentioning for SSD, the high cost of fuel, the high cost of material, the salaries, the power cuts, you have to look every day for material that you want to buy that is not readily available because of the high cost or because you have to get it on the black market. Cooking gas is one example. For my family and myself, being a middle class, we are able to survive well in an acceptable way, being resilient as everybody else, but we don't have the same problems like the already poor people who are really now in extreme poverty. We had to cut back on some things that used to be common and normal, like take a vacation. Now it's considered to be a luxury. You don't do it. It's so expensive. But for the other people, now we are saying that 80% are under the poverty line, 80% of the Syrian people. 60% are food insecure. 14 to 15 million Syrians are in need. 6.2 million children are in need. Those are the latest numbers last month by UNICEF concerning the children. 6.2 million, this is the highest number. 14 to 15 million people in need. Those are the highest number that we are getting. Those were not, during the war and the fighting, we never matched those numbers. But 3-4 years after the fighting ends, it's even worse than before. We are seeing a situation where people are eating a sandwich. They call it a sandwich of bread or a sandwich of air, sandwichet hawa. They cannot afford to put something in it. They can have one meal per day. Sometimes the family members do a rotation of the meals. They cannot all get 2 or 3 meals per day. So we have malnutrition. In the past, we used to say if a family is poor, they will send with their kids to the school a sandwich of oil and thyme, za'atar.
Yes.
Now this is luxury. If you put oil and thyme on your sandwich, it is a luxurious sandwich. So you have, I mean, you can see that it is really very bad. People, I mean, when we have activities in our community centers, you would have a snack as a complementary to the activities. Now kids are looking for the time for snacks, because if they don't get the snack, they don't have anything else to eat in the afternoon or the evening. So the middle class is moving to poverty, the bare minimum, and the poor class is moving to extreme poverty. But still, the elite is filling the restaurants. We have new restaurants that are opening every month, and they are full. You have to make reservations before you go. So this is not hitting the elite. It is really hitting the poor people. To come to work, some of our staff have to, and other people, they have to walk long distances because they cannot find public transportation, or they cannot afford it because of the lack of fuel and the high price of fuel. In terms of health, I mean, don't need to say that there are so much medicines and life-saving health services that are no more available and or not available for free. So if you go to a private clinic or doctor or hospital, I mean, it is not affordable. So it becomes very high priced. Some materials are no more available, and those are life-saving materials. Like, for example, we're supporting EPDC, one organization that is running a dialysis center. They cannot find the liquid for the dialysis. It's considered to be dual usage. So, I mean, if it is dual usage and it is a life-saving material, so what do you do with people? And this is not something that you can skip for a week or two. You have to have your 2 sessions or 3 sessions per week all the time. So you have really to, I mean, do whatever you have to do. And Lebanon is no more the place where you can find all the commodities that you need. So the sanctions are raising the cost of doing business. You have higher prices for materials, and the salaries are still down. The salary of government employees, of a good government employee, is $20 to $25 per month. For us, it's a little bit better, but it's still much less than $100 per month for our triple SD salaries on average. Mm-hmm. One of the impacts of the sanctions is that there is no more investment. And I'm not speaking only of international investors. I'm speaking of the Syrian investors who have money piled in banks outside, who would like to come back or to send money for investment, and this is not possible. So you don't have an economy that is running, you don't have new employment opportunities, so salaries are still bad. Transfer of property, we are seeing this a lot. People cannot sustain a living. They are selling property at a cheap price. Yeah. They are selling homes at a cheap price. They are selling furniture at a cheap price so that they can provide food. And some of them are selling property in exchange of illegal immigration. So they want to immigrate. They don't have money. They will tell the smuggler, take our house and make sure that we get to this place. So those are kind of transactions that are happening every day all over Syria.
Wow.
I mean, we can go on and go on. Fuel, I mean, oil is, I mean, Syria is full of oil, but oil is not going into government treasury.
Right.
Where is it going? We know, but one way of denying the people of Syria the money that they should get.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in summary, I could say that
Yeah.
what is happening is designed to hurt the masses of people who are innocent and most vulnerable. Those are the people who are really suffering. I wouldn't say the most, they are really suffering. 90% of the Syrian population is suffering from what is happening. The result of the war, but also the sanctions who are not permitting investment and the running of the economy. Syrian people, if they are allowed, could rebuild slowly their economy, but even that is not allowed.
Right. Wow. And do you see, because I understand that SSSD also operates in the northeast of the country, do you see the same economic impacts in that area as well? Because a lot of times in the US and in the West in general, they like to show this dichotomy of government areas are experiencing the sanctions while other areas are not. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, I mean, that would be a nice cliche, but let's say that three quarters of the humanitarian support is going to the non-government controlled areas, so northeast and northwest, where you have less than 25% of the population. Even with that kind of humanitarian support, the only thing where you have some difference are the salaries because of the presence of international organizations working cross-border. The situation is a little bit better, but it doesn't mean that they don't have power cuts, but mostly water cuts. So they are denied the arrival of water and pumping the water. You know, there are problems between Turkey, the Kurdish administration and the Syrian government authorities. So even people there are cut from the rest of Syria to be able to travel. They need to spend 18 hours, pay a lot of money to be able to cross. Nobody can cross except if you are part of that area. You have the commodities that you want, but you have to have the money to earn them. So my friends just came from Hasake, and they have been now for the last 10 days without a supply of water. So, I mean, everybody is being kept at the edge of what they can do. The Syrian people are resilient, but it is really at the edge. And the examples that I was giving in terms of the livelihood, although we cannot give a solution to rerunning the economy, but those small grants that SSSD is giving Questscope to those 100,000 of people are able to sustain a family, to sustain their living and build towards something bigger in terms of small projects. So we're seeing a lot of those small projects succeeding and growing to become medium-sized projects. So this is really very encouraging. So in spite of the fact that the whole economy is not moving again, those supports that we are giving are making a lot of difference for the individuals, for the family, and for their community.
Oh, that's amazing. And these projects, the people who you're serving with these projects, they're in the northeast, they're in government areas, they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. We are serving the 14 governorates of Syria. Some of them are in non-government controlled, but most of them are in government control because this is the reality of the situation for now.
Of course. Wow. Thank you for going over all of that. And really, I think you really just articulated, really the impact of what individuals are facing on a daily basis, the scarcity that they have to face, and the immense challenges to do just things that we simply take for granted, in the US or in the West. I did want to know, for our audience and the Syrian diaspora in general, I was wondering, your thoughts on what are some of the most effective ways that the diaspora could help your organization, and more broadly, if you have ideas of how they could help the Syrian people in general also.
I mean, if they help us, SSSD Questscope, they will be helping the Syrian population. As I mentioned, funding is very important. The routing for funding is available. Questscope, Kurt can elaborate more on this, is a 501c3 organization, and the donations are tax deductible. The routing, it has to change from time to time, but it is available. So mostly when we help the most vulnerable be resilient socially and economically, this is very important. So funding is very important. The other thing that we could envisage also, and this is happening, this summer, there are so many expats coming back from Germany, from the US, coming to their hometown, seeing their families. Come and see. And there are some of them that are expressing their interest in coming for an internship. So we would be very willing in hosting, welcoming those interns coming for few weeks to few months to few years, whatever is important for, is possible for them, whether it is for their studies or for their professional experience and advancement. We are ready to welcome them and support them. They will be a definite addition to our operation, and they will get huge experience working with us on the ground. So, we will be, I'm extending the invitation, and you can tell all our friends that we are ready and really willing.
Yeah, so there you go, guys. That's a call for action for the Syrian diaspora, for folks who are just interested in Syria and want to help. There's an opportunity there for you to travel and really do some really impactful work on the ground. And so, unfortunately, we're coming close to our allotted time, and I do want to thank you both for taking your valuable time to sit down and speak with me and to the audience. I did just want to see if you had any final words, any closing remarks that you had on our discussion or anything else.
Now, for me, just to reiterate the invitation, your support, financial support is welcome, but your presence and your visiting would be a huge support to us and encouragement.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Roy, and thank you, Kurt. Thank you for both taking valuable time to speak to us today. So thank you for attending. I do want to close by just telling everybody, if you'd like to stay connected with Relief Syria, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You just search for our handle @Relief Syria on Facebook and Twitter, and Relief Syria, one word, on Instagram. Do you guys have any plugs for Questscope and SSD? Any sort of, any social media or anything like that you'd like to tell the audience?
Roy, you guys are very active on social media, mostly in Arabic, is that right?
Yes. So we have a page on Facebook, and we have our website. Syrian Society for Social Development. You can look for it, both Facebook and our website.
Yes, we also are active in social media, maybe not so much on Instagram, but also in Arabic. But we have the website is in English. And also on the website, you can find a way to donate. And that's just questscope.org.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you both for taking your time. I hope that everyone enjoyed this edition of our Fireside Chat. We hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Yeah, fantastic.